Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey friend, the world is a better place because you're in it. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts. You get that bonus greeting on every single episode. So hit that subscribe button and join us as we change the world by fixing our workplaces. We got an awesome episode today. We got the team from Galapagos. We got Germaine Huka and Ilse, and they are compliance and ethics operations partners at Galapagos. This is a biotech company, and these guys came in a couple of years ago to stand up a new program in a really highly regulated industry. And they've done some really cool innovations, I think, and I'm really excited to dive in. How you guys doing today?
Really good, well, thank you. Thanks. Good to see you, Nick.
Hi. Yeah, good to see you too. So let's just kind of dive in. You know, Ilse, you talked about this in the before we started recording as a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story on how this opportunity landed in your lap and what you saw about it that made it so exciting and caused you to kind of jump into the pool.
Yeah, as how I landed there, quite a story. I have a finance background. I started at AstraZeneca, did 10 years of business finance there. Needed a challenge, they said, and then I moved to compliance, not by choice, more as a challenge, and then stayed by purpose. I think in 2019, that role was cancelled, and then I got to decide whether I wanted to continue in compliance and ethics, or continue in AstraZeneca doing something else, or continue outside AstraZeneca. Definitely decided to continue in compliance and ethics. Started at Takeda, did that for 8 months, and really a great company, great culture. But the scope was a bit limited and smaller, and then came this opportunity at Galapagos, which is a Belgian-based company. So I heard kind of the whole story that they had and the success stories in 2019 with a good deal with Gilead, and then commercialization. And then so an opportunity to really start a compliance program from scratch. And that's really a once in a lifetime opportunity, because often you start from something existing. And when I came, it was really starting from scratch and deciding on what the vision is, and then building principles, values-based principles next to it, and really being consistent in then applying them also in the processes that you build out and in the training that you build out, and really impacting culture. And I think especially that last aspect is something that is a really a good experience, a purposeful experience that you can impact the culture of a company, now 1,500 employees. So that's what brought me here and keeps me here.
Very cool. Germaine, how did you get into the mix at Galapagos?
Again, a few stops before I finally arrived at Galapagos. I started my career as a lawyer, so a commercial litigator to begin with, and then ended up falling into compliance and ethics really by accident. I was at a party actually and was talking to somebody about a company that they were recruiting for, and I had quite a few things to say about that because of my understanding of the way they had done business in countries where my father was from. And so that ended up being a really interesting discussion that ended up on the other side of the margarita, me agreeing to apply for this job. And so 3-4 jobs later, so after a stint in Defence and Aerospace and then in medical devices, I ended up here at Galapagos and haven't looked back. So
that's awesome. That's great that a good decision came out of a margarita. You know what I mean?
Not many do.
Not many do. So you're very lucky in that respect. So I really like, I think it's so interesting when a team comes together and, stand something up with that vision. Ilse, you talked about that vision, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what went into that vision, how you were able to overlay that with the broader vision of the organization, and what benefit that has sort of served you as you stood this program up and sort of started to influence the people that make up the culture that we're trying to influence.
Yeah. The nice thing about Galapagos, it has a really innovative culture. So it's about making it happen, raising the bar. So it's a very innovative environment where people that want to make a difference come to. So you have this willingness to collaborate. What we started with were from those company values and now going to commercialization as a vision, having that, building the trust with the external stakeholders as that angle, really building trust from company values. And there then making values-based principles. That is not new, of course, in compliance and ethics, the values-based principles, but really from an end-user perspective and empowering employees to make sound judgment with a healthy risk appetite, because that's Galapagos is not shy from taking risk.
Right.
Of course, everything which is within the compliance framework, not beyond. So it was really values-based principles, empowering people to make decisions, and from an end-user perspective, and looking how we can kind of connect people with their values and their emotions, rather than anything else, because you're not motivated taking decisions following rules. You're motivated when you can take decisions that are in line with your values and with how you feel about what is appropriate and what is not, and what can bring the company and the culture further.
That is such a massive
that was a
point.
Key element.
What you just said is such a massive point. People aren't going to follow rules for the sake of the rules. They're more likely to follow those rules when they understand them and they feel like they are in, help enable them to better pursue their own purpose or that organizational purpose, to the extent that resonates with them. I'd love to hear a little bit about, I think a lot of people would get sort of scared of that opportunity, right? Of standing something up when there's nothing in place. Talk to me a little bit about why you saw that as an opportunity instead of a threat, and what was really the catalyst for you, within yourself to say, man, I can do this, I can build this kind of a program.
It's indeed the opportunity, and the first 3 months, I think I was scared. I was really scared and stressed, because you come in this team where it's really important that you're aligned on the vision. If you wouldn't be, then something doesn't work, because then you can't continue in a team. But it's because this starting from scratch, and well, that's what we thought. I think we really started from scratch with the vision and combining it with the values that Galapagos has. Other things that needed to be built, like processes, integrating compliance requirements into the processes to facilitate as much as possible for the end user. That was, I found more difficult than expected, because I thought you could build those processes. But Galapagos was already active 20 years, so there were already processes in place with a large legal department. And so with departments really focused on their own growth. So I think we're still, and that's one of the challenges, to optimize processes, because they're not the most efficient. And I think that's where compliance and ethics also plays that catalyst role of having that cross collaboration with all the other departments, kind of coming together to a common shared purpose on trying to make it user friendly from the end user perspective. So with my background of finance and process optimization as something that always amused me, that is something that was really a challenge, but I like challenges. That's what makes me drive. And I thought, okay, rather than to have the job at Takeda was really nice and great colleagues, but that wasn't enough challenge for me. So this was more than a challenge in the first 2 years. But it's great to see where we've come to and what we've achieved, and how we do have an impact on culture and work with our employees.
Germaine, as you have kind of built this out, what aspects of that process were, harder than you thought they would be, and what aspects were easier than you thought? What are the main lessons you learned, or that, what are the things you could share with the audience so they could avoid some of the things that maybe you spun your wheels on a little bit?
Yeah, I think that is a really, really great question. It's always good to learn from other people's mistakes. I think the biggest thing for me, and the biggest lesson, I think, is that you need to build your program based on the organization that you're in at the moment. I think everybody in our team had experience of working within the compliance and ethics team previously, and had worked where that either there was an existing framework already or we'd helped to build that. But there isn't really no one size fits all, and something that might work in one company definitely won't work in another. And so from that perspective, the opportunity that we had, as Ilse mentioned, to build our program from scratch, even though it really is a huge challenge and incredibly daunting, means that actually you've got more of an opportunity to tailor your program and make it more bespoke. We still find ourselves having conversations with people where they say, well, at such and such a company, we did it this way and we used to do it that way, and continually. And I think we're always going to have to do this, and it's good to have challenge. It's important that people push us to question why we've built the program the way that we have, so that we can potentially readjust if we need to. But I think for me, the way that we've built our program is great for Galapagos. I wouldn't expect it to work anywhere else. And I think letting go of letting go of your baggage almost, and not all of the lessons that you've learned, but really being open to doing things a little bit differently to the way that you might have done before, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to maybe take a little bit more risk in some areas and less in others, if that's what makes sense for your organization, is really important. And so we've really had to get a proper understanding of the way the organization works, the way the teams are structured, the different personalities around the organization. You know, you might even have a certain personality in one country versus another, which means that even if the risk is relatively similar, you might still want to do things differently because of the way those people work. So to summarize that very, very long answer, I think let go of what you thought would work before and really look at what's in front of you at the moment and tailor your program around the organization that you're with now.
Why do you think that advice is so hard for people to take? Or why is that what you said I think is profound and correct, but I don't think that that's sort of the natural sort of tack people take. Why do you think that is?
No, I think that's completely normal. I think it's natural for us to stick to what we know. It feels safe. And if it's worked somewhere before, why would you try and do something a little bit differently? Yeah. And I think, we're all so busy, and a lot of the time you're just about keeping on top of your inbox and, doing your business support role. And so taking that step back to think more widely about your program isn't necessarily at the top of your agenda unless you make time and are intentional about making time to do that. And so I completely understand it doesn't come naturally to me either. I've had to be really focused and really deliberate in trying to think a little bit differently about the way that we do things. I think in order to be able to do that, you need to have the safety and the space to experiment and fail a little bit as well. And I think that's definitely something that we've had in our team. And the head of our team is really encouraging for us to kind of, not think about what we're doing. But if we think that a different approach would work better, as long as we can set out the rationale behind the decision, we get the time and the space to do that. And if we get it wrong, that's a lesson learned, and we take that lesson into the next thing that we do. But it's scary being able to do that and risk getting it wrong. And not everybody has the boss that we have that allows you that space. So I really do understand why some people might struggle with that and why it would be difficult. It hasn't been easy for us either. But I think it's a really important mindset, and it's a really important process to get you out of the habit of just automatically doing what you've done before without really thinking about how that serves you and your organization now.
I have this theory that I just made up just now.
Great.
And it's that the culture of the compliance team or the culture of the ethics team really is critical to get right if it's going to actually affect the culture in the organization.
100%.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about, the culture on this team. I think you guys said that it's 5 people right now. Talk to us about the culture of that team and maybe try to separate, if you can, the extent to which that culture is influenced by the type of company you're in, which is a fast-moving kind of, biotech companies in general are, as Ilse said, they're okay with risk, right? They're fast-moving. They're a little bit more nimble. They're less rigid. Talk to me about how that has sort of been complemented by, the team culture and the individuals on it, the leadership on it, and things like that.
maybe start from, we all come from other pharma companies, and you kind of come with, you want to do things differently because if you come from big pharma, so you've seen what works, what hasn't, and you want to try out what you think is going to work, but you haven't been able to try out. And that's what's so nice about the team. It's like a playground where you can try out things, and if you see that they work, we continue on it, and as long as they make sense in our vision, because that's a consistent criteria that we want to apply and be consistent in, then we can go ahead. And that is really tailored also to the spirit of the company, to just make it happen. Go out there and find the colleagues that you need to get something happening. We do try to do that in setting up small pilots, so we don't want to do big things all at once, but really try out and see whether it works, whether it resonates, and then build on that, so that it kind of naturally and organically spreads throughout the company. I think in the first 2 years, we really had the opportunity. It was focused on the commercialization, so really supporting those that visit healthcare professionals and healthcare organizations with all the main activities that they do. And then it was with the code of conduct and the speak up and listen up. And those are things that really are close to culture. And then you can see whether that all fits within that compliance and ethics. So we're moving more to the ethics part of it. And we feel that it also more and more resonates with the culture of the company. And so that you connect people more with that cultural aspect, with the values that they have, to get a more passionate decision making or passionate activity, which is again very aligned to the culture of Galapagos. I don't know, Germaine.
I would probably just jump on the back of that to say, really, and I've debated about this with compliance professionals from other organisations and from other industries, but we are really focused on building a program that gives people everything they need to make a decision the right way. We can't build our program based on people that want to get it wrong or that want to bypass, the framework that we built. There's nothing you can ever do to stop those people, and you could spend your life trying to build barriers. That is not our philosophy at all. The way that we try to build our program is that we give people the equipment that they need, the resources that they need to make values-based decisions. And we're here to support them in those difficult times where there's a grey area, to talk things through and to make a risk-based decision. And that decision incorporates compliance and ethics risk, but there are also a myriad of other things that they would need to consider to balance out that decision-making process. And so we intentionally will never, or very rarely, be a function that gives a yes or no to things. We don't approve business decisions. It's not our place to do that. We don't have all of the required information to make that decision. But we're focused on, first of all, giving people, as I've said, the resources they need to do that, but also, as Ilse was saying, talking about values, talking about what it means to be a member of the Galapagos team. What do we care about as individuals, and how do we bring that into our day-to-day? What are we doing in our day-to-day lives and taking out of our work lives that we would be proud of? I think we've all seen a lot of studies that show, and we've done the personality tests that show that some of us behave quite differently outside of work as we do inside of work, and bridging the gap between that disconnect has been really important to us. So when we're building things like our code of conduct and our Speak Up, Listen Up program, it's based on making people think about their values and making people think about whether they would be happy for people that they cared about to understand their decision-making process, so that when they're making a decision on behalf of Galapagos, they're not just doing it the right way because they think that they have to, or they think that they're going to get caught or get into trouble if they get it wrong, but because they want to, and because they want their professional values to be aligned with their personal values. So it takes a long time to do that. It takes the confidence of your organisation that you're doing it the right way, because alongside saying that we won't be the people that sign off on things or say yes or no, we also have things in place to make sure that we're checking. So we're not checking everything at the front end, but Ilse has been focused on building a really strong monitoring program so that we can trust but verify. So there are things we do to balance that out. But our approach, in a similar way that we deal with our team, is that we trust people to make the right decisions. We trust that people want to do that. We give them the equipment that they need to do that. If they get it wrong, we help them learn. And obviously, unless it was intentional, we help them learn from that. We learn from that. If there's something we need to do to address that in our processes, we can do that. But that's our approach, and I think that's kind of our philosophy when it comes to compliance.
And this is such like a beautiful approach. It's less of like the heavy hand holding the hammer or something, and it's one, as you said, it's based on trust, and it seems to be based on effectiveness and understanding and recognizing that. Like, let me just say this: some programs, they're really built around the assumption that like everyone's a criminal. And I don't find that that's true. I don't think everyone's trying to like skirt the rules. I think most people are trying to do the right thing. And to the extent that they're not doing the right thing, it's due to some ignorance, for lack of a better term, not some arrogance or some like negligence. You know what I'm saying? Ilse said, everybody came from other pharma companies, and you saw like, man, I want to do something different if I could sort of build my own house. What were some of the things that you saw from other experiences you had that you felt like they got wrong that you wanted to get right here? And I'd love to hear both of you guys answer that.
Sure. So I might just jump in just because it carries on from what I was saying, and not naming any names. And this is something that I picked up not just from pharma or medtech, but other industries that I've worked in. Very well-intentioned compliance and ethics teams can build a real belt and braces process that involves people going through a million different approvals. And if you do that, you take the focus away from where the real risk is.
Totally.
All of a sudden, people's time is spent just going through the paperwork and the bureaucracy. Whereas if you really focused your program on making sure that those approvals happen where it's a high risk activity, you're focusing your time on the stuff that matters. And you are signaling to your teams that you trust them, but that you also expect them to understand where the risk is and take appropriate action. And, one of the things that I've learned from different jobs and also from my personal life is that the minute somebody thinks, someone else is going to take care of this, you disengage. You think, okay, well, I don't really need to think about this. And that's not how we want to build our program. Because if there are 10 approvals in a line, person number 2 is going to think, okay, well, I don't really need to think about this because there are 8 other people that will come after me. And you're not empowering anyone, and you're also not giving anybody the opportunity or creating the expectation that people need to be accountable for what they're doing. And so I actually think that having a really overly burdensome, heavy program is counterintuitive and creates an environment where nobody's really thinking about what they're doing, and they're not making decisions based on a thoughtful process. They're just going through the motions, and that's when you start to lose track of the real risk and things fall through the net.
I mean, there could be a whole webinar on what you just said. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, that is so. Yeah. I find that to be so true. Ilse, what about you? What experiences or what things did you say, man, I'm going to do that totally different? In this opportunity.
Very much aligned to Germaine as well. You want to keep it as simple as possible so that people can think and not go through the motion without really thinking and without really making that decision themselves. That has been a challenge, though, because you think, okay, we start from scratch, but even then, so it's really about keeping the processes as simple as possible and getting the people to what they need to know at the time they need to know it. So the challenge for me in being operations is very much making sure that they know what the culture is, they know what the vision is, but it's getting the right information at the time that they need it. Not train them up front about things. That's more about really the ethical decision awareness and what it's about. But then it's bringing the relevant principles and sometimes the limits and limitations to where the activity is as close as possible. So that people indeed, and try to keep it as simple as possible. Also that is a challenge that we try to maintain in the countries out there as well, because there is a tendency to want to document more and structure more, but then it's really that we have to convince. This is about keeping it simple and keeping people thinking rather than just following a process and not knowing what it's about and what purpose it kind of actually serves.
Yeah, and if you're really trying to be effective, we touched on this earlier. What our job is to influence the decisions that people are making, because your behavior is just the sum total of your decisions, and the sum total of everyone's behaviors really does form the culture. And that culture does ultimately determine like how well the business does, and the inherent risk that's like running through that organization. And so I just find it interesting. I mean, kind of along the way, as you guys have sort of talked about this, I've said this word a couple of times, but this focus on effectiveness, this focus on the why, the focus on the people, bringing that trust to bear really does open it up to not let sort of the compliance tail wag the business dog. And that's what I think a lot of folks are fighting about, especially at larger organizations where there's that sort of maybe like legacy ethics and compliance rigidity that's ultimately, not having the impact that those folks who are well-intended, who really have a vision to try to make those changes, they're just not able to really kind of make that change that they want to make,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's also about working together with other departments, because it's not just compliance and ethics, as each department has their own purpose and to pursue in a process that ultimately lands with end users. And it's now finding those, working very collaborative with other departments to really look at it from the end user perspective and integrate it for them and make it as much as simple as possible for them. But it's really a joint effort in this company that still is structuring itself. Has had an explosion of employees, but now is really kind of in the next phase of optimizing those processes that were kind of each separate.
Yeah, and our challenge to drive that influence is maybe a little bit more difficult today. Maybe it's not, but for the sake of my comment here, let's just say that it is, because like we're bombarded by so many other like things that are going to leech our attention, right? You spend time on TikTok or Twitter or something, and you're just kind of scrolling through. Nobody wants to read a full book anymore. They just want to read a short post. And so, we have to battle against that tendency, as Ilse said, to like, well, just put more sort of verbiage in the policy and cross your fingers and hope that like that takes care of it. It's never going to happen. And so I'd love to walk through, two things. I'd love to hear kind of like high level, how did you kind of approach this? I think what I heard was you guys kind of came in and kind of tried to learn the business and understand the values and understand these sort of different departments and how sort of the business worked. And then you started to phase through, let's build out a code of conduct. Let's start talking, let's start kind of revamping the speak up culture. Are those kind of the main points along the development that you would share as like a good approach for someone else who might be trying to stand up a program themselves? Like how would you tell somebody, hey, here's the recipe. It's going to be unique for your particular business, but this is kind of the approach I would take.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you mentioned speak up, and I want to talk about that a little bit, just because I think a healthy speak up culture is so important for any organization. And there are a few things that everybody should do when if you're building a program or if you're kind of revamping your program. But making sure that you're nurturing your speak up, listen up, as we call it. We don't only focus on the speak up. It's as important as making sure people know how to listen. And that is so important, because as soon as you start making it clear to people that it is safe for them to voice a concern, yes, speak up is about concerns, but it's also about sharing ideas and solutions and opinions. All of a sudden, the organization is open to so much more than it would have been if it is an environment where only certain people have a voice. If you have an environment where every single person is a gatekeeper for your business processes because everyone feels safe to say, oh, wait, hold on a minute, I'm not sure we should do it that way because, of this risk or because that's outside of process, that problem potentially gets fixed at that point, as opposed to letting it run on and on and on to the point where you've got a full-blown investigation on your hands. So that speak-up culture is so important from that side of things. A big part of the compliance and ethics risk is taken care of if your speak-up culture is healthy. So we spent a long time at Galapagos really building our speak-up program, and that comprised of different training and different awareness and communication initiatives. It's continuing into this year. It will be an ongoing project that never leaves us. Ilse and I were joking before because it was a project that I kind of started, and I'm kind of thinking of it as like a little baby that I now want to grow up and kind of grow its own wings and go and do its own thing. And it's starting to do that. People are starting to take ownership of it within their own teams and building it and shaping it to what's needed in their part of the organization. So I think that's one part of it. I think the other thing you kind of mentioned was talking about, okay, well, how do you operationalize that? And Ilse mentioned it before. I think for us, a key thing is moving away from those really hefty policy documents and process documents that Nick, you referenced before, where you're hoping that if you put every possible outcome in this paperwork, then hopefully that has you covered. It absolutely doesn't. I hate reading long documents as long as everyone else. I really do find it boring. What I appreciate is when people make an effort to make sure that the stuff that I really need to know is really easy for me to see and really easy for me to understand, and it's accessible at the point at which I need to use it. There is no point in giving me a long manual on how to fill out my tax return, for example, 12 months before I'm going to do that, because I'm going to forget it by the time I have to do that exercise. So if we know there are certain activities that people have to do within the organisation only once in a while, give them the information at the point at which they need it, put it at the entry point of the tool, online tool that they need to use, so that before they can go into completing that exercise, they have to do a quick training, or they have the guidance document ready and available for them to help them to do it. So it's all about thinking about the user experience and how people work in practice and the way people retain information. So we're focusing on creating what we call job aids. So we try to keep them into one page. We try to put them into very clear sections. This sounds really basic, but it takes a long time to compress a 10-page policy into a one-page document. And it's not about taking out information. It's not about shortening it for the sake of shortening it. It's about pulling out the pertinent information so that the stuff people need is there and easy for them to find it and use it when they need it, because there are very few people that want to have to sift through 10 pages to find the one answer to the question that they need. So.
Yeah, and in order to do that effectively, you have to have kind of a balance of essentialism and materiality, coupled with, I guess, also kind of an understanding of how the business works, i.e. how the individuals in those different business units actually engage with whatever they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And also branding. I mean, we're going to run out of time, but thinking about your branding and the layout as well, all of that kind of thing, and how things are designed, and how people can recognise that this is a compliance and ethics process, and the way you lay it out on the page so that it's easy for people to take in. Also, you look like we were going to jump in now.
But the branding, because that's my baby.
Exactly.
Was one of thinking about the order of the recipe, and maybe that's also Galapagos specific, but I think the first thing that we started with being clear and aligning on that vision, and so values-based principle, connecting with the values, empowering people, trusting people, risk-based decisions, and from there it was a focus on really getting the key principles on key activities out there, because the commercialization was ongoing. It was very important that it was done in the right way. So it was about setting up basic process. It was about hygiene factors, basically. And then in the second phase, the code of conduct, which was a legal document, that was when we started to work on the culture, and then the speak up and listen up as a next phase. What we're planning to do next is also that confidence in decision making, because we see that people sometimes struggle with so much accountability or responsibility or freedom to decide, and now further enhancing, consolidating the framework, see where we need to further simplify it, but adding a layer of third-party due diligence as well, and aligning on risk appetite, because now it's a bit all over the place in the different departments, so it needs to be clear and understood when we do that confidence decision-making, that we're clear on what the risk appetite is and what that means. And monitoring, so now we're 2 years in, we have a lot of data that we want to use to provide insights. So rather than do sample size monitoring, we're looking at really sharing the insights that we get from the data. So now that's why we attracted a data analyst profile to help us in that, and further enhance and kind of see where we need to build further. But I think the cultural aspect is very big, and also the simplification of the processes to really be able to deliver on what we see as our vision and mission, and promise to the people they can make their own decisions.
Not much on our plate.
Yeah, that's all. That's all. Yeah, go home. You're done. But I mean, this is touching on so much about why I love ethics and compliance. I mean, it has everything in it. It has influence. It has branding, as you said, it's marketing, it's deep understanding, there's analytics in it, there's ops in it. I mean, it's really this multifaceted thing that you have to get right on all these different facets if you're ever going to achieve the potential, impact that you theoretically could. You talked, Elsa, about data analytics, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how your finance background has influenced how you've approached using this data to help drive more improvements in your program and ultimately more improvements in your culture.
Yeah, that's why I really think I'm in the right function with my background. And I attended your 3 last data analytics, because I was very keen to see, indeed. Yeah, my finance background is what if we talk about risk, I want to measure what the risk is.
Right.
I don't want only to know, okay, there's a risk, but then we need to be able to talk about what are we talking about, because that's also if we want to focus our controls and impacting human behavior on where the risk is, we need to know what quantify it or be able to do that. Definitely my finance background has helped me, and especially with that process optimization type of thing. I think I set up transparency reporting, so the disclosure of transfers of values in Europe, both in AstraZeneca as well as in contributed to Takeda. And here I had to start from scratch to see, okay, how are we going to publish as soon as we promote? So I think, and that's why we're so keen. We have different platforms that we get data from, and it's really now getting a visibility on that data and seeing what the activities are, and seeing it provides insight on how countries are different, and does it make sense, or is that justified? Is that also getting an overview, because the countries are very much in the operational, in their activities, in paying healthcare professionals for services, and funding healthcare organizations. It's an operational process, but you need that level of distance and oversight to be able to see is that still does that still make sense? Is that in line with our philosophy? And it's using the data to provide the insights to the markets to help them in that, and also that they can benchmark a bit. So definitely my finance background, and that's the beauty about the team. Germaine has a legal background. Stephanie has a scientific background. Another team member has a psychology degree, and I have a finance background, and now we have an engineer on top. So it brings a lot of very interesting perspectives, but all with one thing in common, that we love impacting culture and behavior.
Yeah, and that diversity on your team with these different backgrounds really allows not only your organization to appear to the rest, or your department to appear to the rest of the organization as a little bit more well-rounded, but that cross-pollination in these sort of different backgrounds that you all have had probably allows for a lot more sort of synergistic impact on this culture that you're trying to affect.
True.
100%. If it was just any single one of us making a decision about how to build our program, it would be so much weaker than it is right now, because of having the diversity of thought and the diversity of backgrounds in our team. Our program, I think, is so strong, and we all have our different strengths, but we've learned so much from each other. And when I'm looking at data, for example, I think, okay, well, how would Ilse think about this, or how would she build this, or how would she present this? And being able to mirror that, because that's part of what we're now starting to talk about, that bridge of compliance and ethics into DE&I questions and ESG questions. Well, if we're going to expect that, we need to be showing it in our team ourselves, and we definitely are, and our program is so much stronger because of it.
I can just feel the passion coming from both of you, and I just love how you talk about this as kind of a compliance journey. There's no destination thinking in this conversation at all. It's really focused on effectiveness, and it's really focused on, how can we serve the people in our organization to better help us meet that mission. We are kind of getting to the end here, which is a little bit a shame, because I wanted to talk about some more behavioral science stuff. I wanted to dive into some more data analytics.
You'll have to get us back, Nick.
I will have to. But as we wrap up, what's one piece of advice, if you can go back in time, Germaine, and find a young Germaine, give her a piece of advice years ago, what would
Germaine
that be?
is still young. Thank you very much. I should not. Sorry to interrupt. What we should do? I'd probably have a lot more confidence in my approach, and I think, again, I wish we had a little bit more time. But thinking about what I've learned in building our Speak Up program over the last year, and how important it is to create the space so that everybody has their voice heard and everybody feels like their opinion matters and they have something important to bring to the table. I haven't always felt that myself, and it's having built the Speak Up program and thinking about how important it is to create that space and how much of a responsibility we all have to make that space for other people. I think it's having the confidence in your ideas. You might not have always felt that you've had that space, but once you push yourself to voice those ideas and solutions, you're all of a sudden part of a more diverse team and a more diverse group that's coming up with some really interesting stuff that other people haven't thought of before. The things that we've done in our Speak Up program, I can confidently say I've never seen it being done before. And if I hadn't have felt like I had the space to be open about that and share those ideas, we would never have had it. And the Galapagos Speak Up program would have been all the poorer for it. So I think it's having that confidence to speak, to think outside of the box and make sure you share your ideas and solutions.
I mean, there's so much in that. Like, if you don't have the confidence to speak up with your ideas, you're never going to put a program in place that's going to allow everybody else to speak up. There's some irony in it. And my friend Hema she said this thing, and it's kind of almost become a mantra for me. And it's that I can do hard things well. And just having that belief in yourself really does allow a lot of more impact, to happen. How about you, Ilse? If you can go back in time and find a young Ilse, what piece of advice would you give her?
I think it's probably related to that confidence piece. Don't mind too much about what others say. It's not in your control. Focus on what is in your control. Don't mind what the others say, and don't mind what's out of your control. Focus on what's in, and don't overthink.
I love it.
Just speak out.
I love it. Well, listen, we are at time. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I love what you guys are doing. It's really inspiring to hear, this team and the impact that it's having, and the innovations that you're pushing out into your program. We can all make the world a better place by making our workplaces better. And kudos to you. My hat's off to you both for the impact you're having.
Thanks very much, Nick. Like what you do too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
bye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Bye.